Hello, folks. This is Brian Handshy. I'm with Lark Consulting. I'm here today with my colleagues, Vanessa Gerber, who's with CleanFund, and also Alyson Hallander, who is with PlanIT Impact. Today, we'd really like to discuss with you about improving energy efficiency and how to maximize return on investment and then learning how to pay for it. And this is really going to be a conversation about the platform that PlanIT Impact can bring in terms of analyzing design, and then some financing options that CleanFund can bring largely through the PACE background. So with that, we'll go ahead and move forward. And today on our agenda, we'll do a few brief introductions. We've kind of topped it off a little bit, but we'll give you an idea of who we are and then a little intro into commercial PACE for those who need a little refresher or have not heard of it. We'll get into that. And then an introduction into who and what PlanIT Impact is. We'll do a quick demo of both platforms from PlanIT Impact, so you can kind of look at how they view efficiency modeling and cost analyses. We'll do a demo of CleanQuote and how they can use their integration and technology in terms of pricing these types of improvements. And then we'll get into a little bit more discussion about how PlanIT Impact and CleanFund and PACE funding can really help owners, their reps, developers, and others in the architectural engineering and construction fields to really take advantage of these platforms. And with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Vanessa Gerber, for her introduction.
Thanks, Brian, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Vanessa Gerber. I work in business development here at CleanFund. I've been here just over 2 years, came in doing marketing pretty exclusively, kind of the behind the scenes of a webinar like this, and a lot of educational content, as PACE is still something that a lot of folks across the design, development, and commercial real estate finance communities are still understanding. And so now I work in business development, working with strategic partnerships across the country, and also am involved in some early stage sales. So very, accustomed to all sorts of different conversations and different parts and timelines of where a project stands and how PACE can fit in to make a project happen. So looking forward to speaking more about PACE, some case studies, and showing you our online quote platform to help move proposals forward. And with that, I'll move on to Alyson to introduce herself.
Great. Thanks, Vanessa. My name's Alyson. I'm just coming off a bit of a cold, so my voice is a little scratchier than I typically prefer for these types of things, but please bear with me. My background, I've got about 6 years of experience, or over the past 6 years of experience, I've worked with, on the software side of the AEC industry, primarily with sustainability focused tools. I'm currently working with PlanIT Impact, lead sales and marketing here. I have past experience with Sapphira, a building performance analysis tool, as well as AutoCase, a green building and green infrastructure economics analysis tool. So I've got some experience in the space, and I'm looking forward to telling you a little bit about PlanIT Impact and how you can use it to find building design strategies that improve efficiency, balance upfront costs, and maximize return on investment for the building owner or developer. And I guess we can move it on to Brian.
All right, hey folks, again, I'm kind of helping to be a bit of a broker in between here. My experience really has been, whereas Alyson and Vanessa are on the ground, both as capital providers and consultants in terms of technology. My experience over the last 20 years has been both in the built environment and financing of affordable housing, with the last 10 largely focused as a senior advisor at the Federal Housing Administration on senior family and multifamily insurance, and more recently working in the commercial and residential PACE space as a broker and as a market development consultant. I'm also a lead green associate and have focused on various forms of public financing structures over the last decade. So looking forward to kind of helping give a more of the on-the-ground practitioner perspective of how deals can form and how the traditional way of doing things versus how PlanIT Impact and CleanFund can kind of help innovate that process. And with that, again, we'll head back to Vanessa to move into the substance of the program.
All right, thanks again, Brian. So I want to just provide a quick overview to commercial PACE financing, to kind of the design and engineering audience that I know we have gathered here today. So ultimately, PACE is, simply put, a financing product that is designed for and dedicated to realizing more efficient and resilient buildings. I'll kind of get into some of the technical aspects of it without going too far into the details. We'll provide some resources in the follow-up. And if you do have questions as we go, definitely use the Q&A. We'll get to them towards the end. But I just want to provide an overview of what PACE is, with the objective of really just having this be a resource that the design and engineering and even development teams can know about in developing projects, and be able to have the resources to dive in when the project specifics come to the financing piece. So ultimately, PACE, it stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy. That's what the acronym stands for, and the C comes from commercial. As Brian mentioned, he's also worked in residential, which is available in a number of states, but commercial is available currently. It's legislation enabled, so it's ultimately a public-private partnership, but all of the capital is coming from private parties. It's private investment for public good improvements, and that, as you can see kind of in the middle of the slide here, are energy efficiency, water conservation, and then in relevant states, things like seismic strengthening or storm strengthening. And that, again, has to do with the geography, but California, Utah have seismic, places like Florida have storm strengthening components that can be financed, which are important to keeping safe, healthy, resilient buildings. So ultimately, it's unlike traditional finance products in that it actually goes through the property tax bill, takes the same form as municipal bond finance, which essentially just uses the property tax bill as the mechanism to pay for public improvement projects. So again, tying it back to private investment for the public good. Private capital providers like CleanFund work with property owners and developers across the country to finance these projects, and the way in which they see that ultimately the invoice, as it were, the bill, is whenever they pay property taxes, it shows up as a special assessment, just as it would for the street lighting project or building a new firehouse in the area, etc. So that's kind of the overview of how PACE is structured and why it's structured in that way. Again, tying back to the earlier part of it being designed for these efficiency and resiliency projects. So there are certain qualified costs in a project, often kind of folks more directly in the commercial real estate development and lending world think of it as, oh, it's only if I'm developing, a LEED platinum building, which that might not be specifically what they're focused on. There are a lot of components, from everything from a LEED platinum building to kind of a CapEx, just infrastructure modernization project. So that's really everything that's going to improve the efficiency and performance of the building, with those eligible improvements kind of broadly listed there. Electrical, mechanical, insulation, ceiling, cool roofs, and then as well as things like solar, storage, EV charging, water conservation in certain states. And then we ultimately transact across different types of commercial buildings. So anything that has a private owner, so no kind of publicly owned property, those are your public schools, etc., or government owned buildings. But that's a lot of building stock across the country. And so PACEs really can be flexible in terms of the components that are eligible and the properties that are eligible in a lot of different projects. And so we find that the best use cases, this is a list of 6 things, and within them, I'm sure you all can imagine different projects even within this, but just to provide some categories and kind of show the versatility of PACE financing as a product, there's a lot of use in value add, repositioning, adaptive reuse types of projects, just kind of slightly smaller renovation or tenant improvement projects, In many states, new construction is also eligible. So there's a lot of components within a new construction project that are going to be eligible for PACE, and we can help ultimately in that case really help to drive costs down. And then there's a whole slew of other slightly more niche things, but like I said as well, building modernization, CapEx types projects, and we're ultimately, CleanFund looking at about $500,000 of PACE cost and up. We do, some of the larger commercial transactions. So depending on the scope, it could be, $500,000 of PACE eligible costs or 50 million. And we are happy to look at that. Just to give you a sense of the PACE market, there has been a lot of activity. There hasn't been as much activity relative to other finance products because PACE has only been around, commercial PACE, since 2009. And so, of course, it's going to take a little while to take off, but we're seeing very exciting development across the industry, more competition, which is a good thing for the industry and for the product, and having more volume across the country. And so that's just a quick little background that PACE is real, is being deployed. And CleanFund was an early actor. Our founders were PACE pioneers, helped design PACE as a product. And ultimately, I know there's a lot of text here. This will just be here for your reference when we send around slides. But CleanFund is a direct capital provider. And all we do is provide commercial PACE financing. So at the end of the day, that's who we are and what we do and what we've always done. And then just, in terms of how CleanFund can be here to serve, all of you across the AEC industry, is really helping to provide, the financing that can help you deliver your best design, and can help you deliver the best project, and avoid value engineering where it seems like cost might be getting in the way. And I know Alyson, I'm looking forward to getting to the demo here and then showing you kind of how you can use some simple resources that we've pulled together to help present that to your clients. But ultimately, we do all the underwriting of the project. We're underwriting to the real estate, because PACE is tied to the real estate, to the property, and not to the borrower. And we do all the interface with the program anywhere across the country where there's an active program. We make sure that the components that we're financing, meet the statute, and we work with the senior lender, which I won't get into too much detail, but that's part of the process and something that we are very well equipped to do. And then we fund the transaction, and the project, can move forward. We also have some resources that I'm happy to share with anyone here, just in terms of informational, or if you're ready to start really diving in, just kind of overview PACE, kind of some further financing terms. But we also have the most up-to-date geography lookup tool. So that's the first thing we do, is say, what's the address of this building? And is it already active is it already in an active PACE territory? And so we have that, and that is embedded into CleanQuote, which we'll view here in a moment. Quick case study. At the time, this was the largest PACE transactions, was in Dallas. A great case study in terms of total redevelopment, adaptive reuse of an old warehouse building, turned it into hotel, ground floor retail, as well as some top floor multifamily. This is a total holistic retrofit, and just kind of goes to show the variety of components that are eligible. And then kind of speaking more to the cost, value proposition of how PACE works and what it drives to the client, is their overall cost of capital there was significantly lower because they were able to use PACE rather than a more expensive loan. And that was really because we were able to access them. Otherwise, their broker and owner's rep, if they didn't know about PACE, would say, okay, well, 15% mezz loan is the best that we can do. But because they knew about PACE and were able to access resources to understand how it could slot into this project, they were able to drive a serious amount of savings for their client. And then this is the case study that we're going to dive into on PlanIT Impact, at least kind of hypothetically. This was one that we did in Rochester, Minnesota. It was a complete renovation, repositioning of an existing hotel with work done to the lobby, common areas, all of the rooms, as well as some glazing around the second floor of the building. And though the project cost was about $20 million, and more than $2.5 million was PACE eligible, through conversation with the client and the whole team, decided that that was the desired amount for the PACE financing piece. And so we worked with them and ended up financing the HVAC systems, LED lighting, envelope improvements, low flow water fixtures, as well as soft costs. So soft costs, including permitting, engineering, et cetera, are also eligible. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Alyson, and she'll provide an overview, and then we'll dive into her demo, and then back to CleanQuote briefly to show you how to get a quote and a quick proposal on a project.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Vanessa. Well, let's go ahead and dive into the PlanIT Impact piece of things. So today I'll give you a brief intro into PlanIT Impact and how architects, engineers, and building owners use the tool to make better design decisions that impact building efficiency, cost, and return on investment. PlanIT Impact can be used on both retrofit and new build or new construction projects. So of course, for new construction, you do have more flexibility or freedom with design strategies that you can implement. But existing buildings are a really great opportunity for using PlanIT Impact as well. If you're putting capital into your building, you want to get the most value out of it. So this can really help you to find those high impact strategies for improving your efficiency, improving your building's performance, balancing capital costs, and lowering your utility bills once it's all said and done. So our whole mantra is about being fast, easy, collaborative, and smart. So the fast, easy, smart, we're the fast, easy, collaborative, and smart solution to building performance analysis. We were founded by an architect, Dominique Davison, who through running her own design firm, she consistently ran into the typical roadblocks for these types of analyses and just kind of sustainability and looking at efficiency altogether. So, lack of time, need for expensive specialists or consultants to run energy models, no idea of what more efficient design strategies might cost, and no idea of what the exact long-term value would be for the client. So she founded PlanIT Impact to solve these problems and really create a fast, easy, collaborative, and smart solution for every building project, not just those projects with huge budgets for consultants and full-blown sustainability teams. So the smart and fast aspects of the tool come from the engine that's under the hood of the analysis. We call that our discovery engine, or really what's fueling the tool is what we call our discovery engine. We're taking a process that can take hours, days, and sometimes even weeks if you're waiting on an outside consultant to get back to you, and we're trimming it down to just seconds for the analysis. Taking time to, step one, really fully set up a project, and step two, run the discovery analysis takes really only a few minutes, but the analysis itself, it outputs results really nearly instantaneously. We achieve this level of speed because the discovery analysis is built on a machine learning engine that has pre-run hundreds of thousands of energy models and other water analysis models ahead of time. So the outcome for you is that you get accurate results in a fraction of the time as traditional models or traditional methods. The output of the discovery engine, it basically provides the answers to some of your design questions. It provides suggested design strategies for questions around energy use, water use, stormwater, and transportation. So instead of iterating and making it a guessing game as to what you can do to your building to produce the best results, The tool really does it for you and figures it out and really just kind of does all the work for you, figuring it out. So we're taking something that's historically been a job for a full engineering team or a team of consultants, and we're making it accessible to the everyday person. So there are built-in inputs for envelope and mechanical systems, so there is not any kind of complex project setup. We're really trying to make it as easy as possible to get in, create a project, and see some actionable insights for your building. Finally, for architects that are signed on to the 2030 commitment, I know there's a good handful of architects on the call, so this might speak to you. There's direct reporting to the design data exchange. So if you are signed on the 2030 commitment, or if you're thinking about it, but are worried about the work that's entailed with just kind of fulfilling the reporting requirements, we made it super easy to just send off your data and forego that whole kind of tedious process of just inputting numbers into that tool. Oh, excuse me. Oops, wrong way. There we go. So finally, teams who have been the most successful with PlanIT Impact use this in a very collaborative environment where the building owner, architect, and engineer are all looped in on the project. You've shared on the project. They can sit down in a room together, work through some of the options in the tool, see what's feasible, kind of work through some of the pros and cons of each option, and really make decisions together for the project. All right, so now I'm going to transition into the product demo. Let me go ahead and, oh yeah, great. Yep, now I'm going to go ahead and transition to the product demo. We're going to circle back on this Hotel Indigo project that Vanessa was just talking about a moment ago. This was a full retrofit, kind of complete makeover of an existing hotel, a Holiday Inn. And so, with these kinds of retrofits, it's such a good opportunity to incorporate energy and water saving measures that are going to really have a benefit to you when it comes to, savings, utility savings in the long run. So let's go ahead. I'm going to share my screen. All right, so I'm currently in PlanIT Impact. I've already set up a project just for time's sake. But again, we're going to be looking at this Hotel Indigo, complete retrofit of an existing Holiday Inn. I found a picture of the old existing building. You can see it's pretty outdated. We've got a lot of concrete here, so really a great slate to work with lots of room for improvement. So let's say we have this proposed retrofit strategies here. So, this is a kind of a retrospective type analysis, but let's just kind of rewind, go back in time a little bit and envision if we were just early on kind of getting this project started and starting to think about what we want to do to our building to maximize the value of the improvements that we're going to make to this building. So what I'm going to do, and Vanessa, would you mind putting yourself on mute because I hear like a little bit of background
Yeah,
noise?
I'm hearing that as well.
Maybe it's, all right, I don't hear it anymore, so, okay, great. Sorry about that for the audience. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to use PlanIT Impact's discovery analysis to find some design options that are going to really reduce my energy use, balance added building cost, and really lower my payback period, or lower the time that I'll see an investment on my return on my investment. I'm trying to lower this as much as possible. So I've got my baseline existing hotel energy use over here. So the currently, or before the improvements, we're at about maybe $320,000 in total annual energy costs for the year. And just noteworthy, I am going to focus only on energy for this exercise. We do have water use as part of the tool. If that is something that people on the call today are really interested about, I'm happy to to kind of take you through it in a deeper dive if you want to request a demo from our website. But just know that right now, energy is kind of going to be the main key of what we're looking at. So first step, run discovery. The discovery analysis will look through all possible design scenarios that you allow it to, or within any constraints that you define. And so what we're first going to do is set a goal or an energy savings goal. Let's just say 30%. The tool by itself will already look for trying to save as much energy as it can, or trying to save more than just that 30%. So I'm going to leave that as the default. That translates to an energy use intensity of 50.3 kBtu per square feet. Then I can set a maximum payback period. So this is the maximum allowable time, which I think my client would be maybe amenable to, waiting for some kind of financial return. But 20 years is maybe a little bit of a long time frame. I typically leave this as the default just because on its own, the tool will look for a PlanIT Impact will try to find strategies that reduce that payback period as much as possible. So I'm just going to leave it as the default from now. And then as I scroll down, I can check out other aspects of the discovery analysis. So I know with my window to wall ratio, on the north and south facades, I'm actually getting rid of some of the windows that were up at the top here. I can kind of see in my rendering that we don't have those windows anymore. So I'm just going to reduce that down. For my east and west facade, we're actually going to increase the glazing just ever so slightly. But it's this point where I can just start to set some basic ranges for the analysis to look at. So here I've got all of our envelope, building materials, envelope settings and inputs. Mechanical setting wise, I'm just going to go into VRF. Our existing building had a PTAC systems. So just choosing this VRF, I've got energy recovery. To the bottom right, I can indicate whether a solar panel system is something that I'm evaluating. This particular project, it's not something that we're looking at, so I'm just going to select this off, and then I'll click run. Excuse me. So behind the scenes, PlanIT Impact's going through all possible scenarios, and what it's going to do is pick out 6, or it's going to come up with 6 options that fit some of the criteria that I just set in that discovery run. So I can see my discovery run has been successful. Let's go check out what some of those scenarios are. So as I scroll down, I've got discovery C1 through C6. These are all the options it's come up with. They all actually look really pretty somewhat similar. Sometimes we get suggested strategies or scenarios that are really just vary as far as the results go. But what we're looking at here in this column, each of these options, we've got a resulting energy use intensity. In the second column, we're looking at the resulting annual energy cost. So, comparatively, like let's look at this one, discovery C1. The outcome, the resulting annual energy cost is about $141,000 compared to $319,000. That's significant savings that I think any building owner would be pretty excited to see. Now, to meet this, to get to these numbers, the design strategies we'd incorporate are going to add $1.5 million, or are going to cost about $1.5 million. And we're going to see a payback, or the client, the building owner, will see a payback in about 8.6 years. So what drills, what kind of is contributing to those costs? Well, using this table at the top, we can see how each design strategy breaks down and impacts energy use, or energy savings, and cost. So the big hitter here, the heavy hitter here, is definitely lighting retrofit. Just really improving on our lighting efficiency has significant energy savings. Now our mechanical system, just kind of switching this out, mechanical systems are pretty expensive. So, we're definitely adding some costs there, but, through all of our strategies here, we're significantly saving our total annual energy use and really driving down our annual energy costs. So this proposed retrofit strategy here, this is the kind of retrospective analysis of what was actually done on this hotel. So I think that the hotel is currently under, or the renovation is currently happening. I think it's slated to be done sometime in 2019, just based on some articles I've read. But we're with the design changes that they've incorporated and the mechanical system replacement, they're achieving. They've nearly halved their energy use in this building, so that's really fantastic to see. While adding 1.5, while costing about $1.5 million, estimated by our tool. This doesn't incorporate the water fixtures replacement, so this cost doesn't include that. That's something that we would use our water use tool to do an analysis from that perspective. But just from building and mechanical or building envelope and mechanical improvements, this is really great to see, as well as this significant decrease in annual energy costs.
So I will dive back in here, and then I just want to do a quick demo of CleanQuote, which is our project quoting platform. CleanQuote is just quote.cleanfund.com. It's our online quote platform. And so, after Alyson's demonstration, we see that kind of 1.5, give or take, dollar amount that's associated with carrying out those projects. So the owner then has a number of options, right? They can just pay for that themselves. They can go, find some other capital to pay for that in different ways that property owners and developers do. And one of those can be PACE, because all the items that Alyson was modeling are going to be eligible for our financing. And so just kind of want to show you how that number, that dollar number, can slot into putting together a PACE proposal. And this can take just about a minute here, which I'll show you. So the address for that property is 220 South Broadway, right there in Rochester, Minnesota. So again, the first thing this does is our geography lookup tool, make sure that it's in an active and eligible PACE territory, which it is. Of course, we knew that because we've already financed this project. But this is what all you're gonna need to do to get a quick proposal for what financing options might look like for your client for this efficiency retrofit project. So this is a hotel, it's a hospitality property, because it's not perhaps a downtown Twin Cities, it's out in Rochester. Of course, the Mayo Clinic is there, which is very exciting, but not necessarily a primary market, kind of the big MSAs across the country. This just helps kind of have better pricing for that specific project on the quote in the secondary, tertiary markets. So select that. This information is not required, the property value and existing debt at this stage. It can be helpful in terms of identifying the maximum amount of PACE, but you might not have that information, and that's totally okay. So we can just skip over that. Go ahead and call this the hotel Indigo. My keyboard wants to respond in Rochester. And because there are those soft costs and the water fixture, low-flow water fixtures that weren't included in that $1.5 million, we can bump it up and say it's about $2 million, for example. And that's going to be for your energy efficiency, water efficiency, soft costs. And since it's not a total redevelopment or repositioning, it's just really a retrofit upgrade of an existing building. We'll select that. We can say we're in planning. Again, this is just information for us. And say they want to start August of this year, and it's going to take about 6 months. February 2020, that puts us, sure, that's fine. Again, this is just information for us. If you're working with specific vendors that we might already be working with, you can enter that here. And we can also work, if you have any preferred vendors that you think would like to use a tool, again, we can work on that after this, but that's where you would put that if we had any, existing discounted pricing, etc. If you want to put some notes here in terms of what the project is, you're welcome to do that, but that's all you need, and we can submit and get a quote. And so if you want to verify that the information is all correct, you can do that there. And you can see that for the maximum term in Minnesota is 20 years. States like California, we can go up to 30. In many states, the max is about 25 years. You can see what the pricing options would look like and what the annual payment would look like. One thing I do want to note here is this was the PACE amount that we had requested, and you'll see that the financed amount is a little bit higher. PACE is 100% upfront financing, so that includes the principal, interest, as well as closing fees, which you'll see here, our cost of doing business, and capitalized interest, which is part of PACE. But the closing fees include both the CleanFund closing costs as well as the program. So that program's cost of doing business in terms of getting the assessment recorded. But that all is included in this quote. And what you can do from there is download a simple one-page PDF quote. And you can also invite people. You can invite the owner directly. Just provide them an email to view the quote and even take a look at and complete the application, which is just a very simple next kind of set of information regarding the property and any existing financing, environmental issues that might be outstanding, etc. And that should take them with that information on hand, again, a minute to complete. You can also invite a partner or someone else on the project team to have a look, and that's the same thing. Just put their email in there, and they will get an automated email from the Clean Quote platform to go ahead and view the quote. So that is how these things might happen together. And again, kind of coming back to the objective of why we're talking about PACE, even though we're CleanFund are here to be the experts in the financing and helping to structure that project with the client. Being able to know about it and even include it in a proposal that includes your full design can be very helpful in terms of being able to achieve that optimal design. And with that, I want to provide Brian some time here to really dive in and share some insights from his perspectives kind of across the PACE process and the efficiency development process. So with that, Brian, take it away.
Thanks, Vanessa. I appreciate that. So, from there, the presentations that Vanessa has done on Clean Quote and where CleanFund comes from. Obviously, there are other providers that are out there, and I just want to kind of some nomenclature when it comes to PACE. You've got folks like a CleanFund who are capital providers directly. When she mentions the word program, we're generally talking about these are the clean energy districts. So there is a public-private aspects to PACE to be able to put it on the tax bill. So funders like CleanFund will come in and work with generally states like Minnesota has MNPACE, which is a statewide PACE provider program. Missouri, for instance, has a few Show Me PACE or Missouri Clean Energy District. Colorado has the New Energy Improvement District. So each of these 35 states that have enabling legislation for PACE have their form of program, and they work in an open environment generally with multiple lenders. And sometimes even banks get involved in that. So in terms of project insights, myself at Lark Consulting, really I've worked on the ground helping property owners and developers who are interested in having that conversation about PACE. I've been at the forefront of working on that side of the deal, but I also have experience working with other government and private sector actors who are interested in other forms of clean energy. And as mentioned in this program today, PACE capital can be used to supplant generally mezzanine, in a complex stack. but it's pretty flexible. And if mezzanine's not a part of it, and there's EB5 money that's being put in addition to senior debt, perhaps PACE can take out a smaller portion of owner's equity and reduce that cost. The point being is that outside of senior debt, that's generally going to see your lowest level of cost. PACE is pretty competitive right now. You're going to see normally somewhere between 500 and 700 basis points for a PACE deal before we include originations. So it's pretty competitive, and it really has to do with the types of improvements that are being done. Another thing I wanted to mention about PACE, to touch on that Vanessa brought up, is most states do have a maximum term in terms of whether that's 10 years, 25, or 30. So that's usually a statutory limit, but it's also additionally kind of limited to the max weight of the improvements that are being put. So generally, to make this easy to understand, if you've got a building thermal envelope that has a useful life of on average 20 years, you can finance that to 20. But if you're doing an HVAC system that has a 12-year useful life, you might be able to punch that up to 15, but you're not going to be able to amortize it out over 20. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. So kind of jumping in, there's really 4 areas of folks that I think, and there's more, there's various shades of design professional, I think, that can benefit from PACE and the intersection of what PlanIT Impact involves. But in terms of design professionals, it's been mentioned a lot today. I really do think that, value engineering has been kind of, excuse my language here, a bastardized term. It's really been used to like, look, I've come up against I'm an owner and I'm coming up against my constraints. Maybe I'm working through a difficult entitlement process. The budget's come down. Perhaps an incentive that we were banking on didn't pan out. Value engineering now becomes, what can we toss out and still really be able to do this program? When you have CleanFund and something like PlanIT Impact, the tool, when you're able to kind of visualize, I think, and look at not only the upfront cost, but see the kind of life cycle cost of what various clean energy measurements are earlier in the design process, you can turn value engineering from removing into kind of a how do we build and gird this into it, and in effect, use it as a cost hedge. And I think we've done that in a few ways. One are through kind of the measured and verified cost from a benchmark kind of, here's how a building would perform, here's how it will perform if you institute these measures. And then there's also kind of, when you couple it with PACE, in that case, you're seeing a financing component reduction in costs, which we didn't mention this in the preview, but PACE operates kind of in the same way that senior debt does, and that the interest is largely tax deductible. So it really is tax dependent on the kind of marginal tax rates of the entity that's using PACE. But that's something to explore and understand, that in addition to the clean energy component, you're getting kind of the financing savings too. So there's really design professionals who I think are able to tell a better story about what value engineering actually can mean. As we have new types of technologies like Passive House, I know in Kansas City, for instance, that's being put to the forefront, where you're seeing kind of that European standard of incredibly robust passive design, which means more focus, I think, on the building thermal envelope and less on the mechanicals, hence the passive. But building that into kind of, moving that from being a kind of would like to have into financing that as the norm. So I think that things like PACE and Clean Impact can tell the value proposition of things like Passive House much earlier, so developers and their contractors can better understand how they can convince lenders and underwriters that this is financeable and helps pay for itself. As I just mentioned, I think developers and property owners are another cadre that really, as they're trying to put pencil to paper and understand what their cost is going to be, often the hard costs are the biggest ones. Generally owners' equity is covering a number of soft costs in terms of energy modeling and architectural design and engineering services. So there's not generally a lot of money left over in terms for hard things. At the end of the day, developers and property owners want to build what will generate a low vacancy rate and a high rental per square foot. I think that we, with PACE and PlanIT Impact, can tell a story where these things that normally would probably, especially on a repositioning, might be a large CapEx expenditure anyway, in outer years of a hold period, can be taken care of up front now, and I think can pay for themselves. The other power of PACE, it is not required, but since it is structured as assessment versus a loan, and it can travel with the property, is that can be negotiated and assumed in a sale. So you may take a 20-year term out on an improvement and only hold the property for 5 years. And you have two options here. Rather than with a loan where you're left with one, you have to negotiate a sale where a price has to reflect the expenditure you made earlier in your hold period. Now you have the opportunity not only to sell it, but to negotiate that assumption. And that obviously helps spread out the cost of that between two owners. So again, another point that kind of gives PACE an additional tool in the toolbox and we think is helpful. We'll go to the next slide. In terms of underwriters and lenders, I think they're obviously a strong component to this. They're seeing complex capital stacks already. I mean, where you're seeing 4, 5, 6 things stacked, where you have monetization of historic tax credits, low-income housing tax credits. There are some that aren't directly in the stack, but investor tax credits that are being taken out on the on solar projects and things like that. Underwriters and lenders need to understand that their position, which is generally going to be the largest in the stack, right, anywhere between 50 and 60% of the total development cost. They really want to know that anything else that's coming in there with them either adds to the strength of the project to perform, or at least provides a de minimis risk that they can kind of work with. And so this is really where PlanIT Impact, I think, can help better illustrate where financing, whether it's done with that bank debt or it's done with PACE, you can see much more early in the process how bank financing can work with others in the cap to get this project done. And it was mentioned that PACE is done as a bond issuance. That is true in some form and fashion, especially on larger commercial projects. But it can also be done without the issuance of bonds, where you just have direct capital injections. So I want to know that PACE in and of itself is like can generally reflect a number of different vehicles and security instruments. But at the end of the day, you do need that public partner in order to make sure it is paid back through the tax bill. Consent management is something that's been mentioned in here. Underwriters and lenders are generally going to see with PACE. PACE, as any other special assessment, is largely in a superior position. It is not accelerable, however, so you kind of have a security instrument where only the amount due and payable each year is ever what can be accelerated. You can't take future amounts of PACE and if there's a default on it, call them due and payable today, unlike senior debt, which can be. So there is a level of managing consent between a senior lender, because they obviously want to protect their preservation in the capital and the collateral that's being used, which is generally the building. So PACE lenders have incredible experience working with that, and I can cite CleanFund as a great example. They almost virtually can get consent on each time, and they do that by being able to tell the story of how what they're financing is improving the cash flow and the net operating income. When you can show a lender that and you can back it up and tell that story, by and by, they're generally okay with going forward. That doesn't mean there's not the occasion where it doesn't make sense and they won't provide consent, but that's the exception, not the rule generally. And then lastly, I think the biggest component, and it's not any different, I think, than tax increment financing or using tax credits, is local government involvement. PlanIT Impact really, I think, can help change the game in terms of helping with the entitlement process by being able to early and show how projects can perhaps maybe rely less on public incentives and can use their own internal net worth and equity to pay for themselves, and then use public incentives to stretch out that project. At the end of the day, I think it's important. I'm not going to read through all these, but you can see that local governments, in terms of helping to integrate and have a discussion about how do these projects work with other economic tools. At the end of the day, PlanIT Impact is really, I think, a game changer in helping funders like CleanFund or a debt provider like US Bank or UMB, and obviously the property owners and developers on the ground, helping them to understand very early, obviously some of these projects have 30-month to 36-month lead time before we're even talking about hitting and breaking into the ground. It's much easier to have a conversation when it's cheaper and earlier to scale in the earlier process than it is to wait to get closer to trying to complete entitlement and then trying to, crash and add energy efficiency into the discussion. So I do want to remind that I'm going to kind of finish with that, and I'm glad to answer questions as we move kind of towards the Q&A. There is a Q&A function you can find there on your controllers if you want to go ahead and type some in. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Vanessa to kind of open up the floor to questions.
Great, thank you. We do have some kind of in regards to kind of as Brian had just mentioned about historic tax credits, et cetera, and other incentives, how PACE works with tax credits, rebates, incentives, et cetera. So with things like tax credits, those are ultimately kind of layers within a capital stack on a project. And so again, that has to do with the overall structure of the financing overall on the project. And PACE can absolutely be in that Dallas project that I showed, had historic tax credit capital as part of the stack. And then in terms of incentives and rebates, whether that's local or state or federal, et cetera, that's essentially just additional savings to the owner. We're financing the improvement project, and if they're going to be getting, a value, that's just additional savings to the property owner. And one here for you, Alyson, just in terms of who you see being the primary users of PlanIT Impact, and kind of at what stage in a project does that usually happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think we see, the tool is set up to be very collaborative. Actually, I think in my demo, I forgot to kind of point out the team section of a project where you can actually add team members based on their email address to your project. We do see this being kind of a very collaborative workflow. As far as who is owning the project and really kind of driving the project in PlanIT Impact forward, we do see that currently as being the architect. But I think we'd see, like, if a building owner kind of knew about PlanIT Impact or knew about PlanIT Impact, knew about this easy way to find really the biggest bang for their buck kind of strategies in reducing energy use and really maximizing value long term. And they wanted to kind of own the project and delegate an architect and kind of an engineer that they're working with to kind of work through the actual data input and running of the analyses. And we kind of see that being somewhat of an optimal workflow as well.
Great, thank you. One more, and then we're gonna have to wrap up here. Is PACE the only type of finance that is compatible with PlanIT Impact? I'm getting a lot of feedback, and I don't know. Let's see. Go ahead and do that. Okay, so that's a great question. That's something that we discussed. Ultimately, PACE is one form of finance, and it is very compatible and in alignment with the types of projects that will be modeled and are modeled on PlanIT Impact. But it is not, ultimately they are valuable in and of themselves. Not every program across the country requires modeling, but as Brian, I think very, very, concisely stated, that being able to use the numbers in terms of the savings and the dollar savings and communicating the story of the project and the value driven through an efficiency project to a lender, the bank lender ultimately, that is incredibly important. So I think that ultimately, being able to use PlanIT Impact to be able to not only understand the value and the cost analysis of the project, but also be able to use that in discussing kind of the financial story is incredibly powerful. But again, PACE and PlanIT Impact have a lot of alignment and are working to achieve projects that deploy efficiency and make the built environment more resilient and sustainable. But at the end of the day, we ultimately are not necessarily required on the respective projects. Though, as we hope you gleaned from today's session, there's a lot of value that can be driven by using both of them, and just wanted to provide the resources here to say, as you're designing and developing efficiency projects, PlanIT Impact is a great platform to be able to model that and see not only just the technical components, but also the cost analysis components. And as you're presenting a project, that dollar value, the project cost, one way to think about it is to, look at PACE financing. And there's some easy resources through CleanQuote to be able to have an immediate kind of proposal you can slot in just as a conversation starter regarding financing options to make these projects happen. So we are right at the hour here, but I wanted to thank everyone for the time today. And again, we'll be sending a recording and slides around later today.
All right, thanks all. Take care.
All right, thanks everyone.